6 o'clock. We will now call our meeting to order. Please join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Glauser.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Stanfield.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent.
Here.
Mayor Long.
Here. Thank you, Sienna. We have a couple of presentations. Introduction of the new treatment plant operator.
I'd like to introduce Jennifer Fay. She is the newest member of our wastewater treatment plant operations team. She started with the city on July 22nd. She moved to Fortuna from Grass Valley for this position. She recently did an internship with the Nevada City, which became a paid position as an OIT. And she has her certifications for D2 for water distribution operator and T2 for wastewater treatment operator, and passed her grade 2 wastewater exam and is currently working on hours to become certified. So we're pleased to have Jennifer and as the newest member of our wastewater treatment plant staff. If you'd like to say anything.
I'd just like to say good evening. I'm very happy to be here. I'm already certified in wastewater grade 2. I love Fortuna. I'm enjoying your weather. I love being outdoors. This is a new challenge for me. So thank you.
Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you. Our next item is a presentation from the Mcclain Foundation for the Gene Lucas Community Center advertising crew. Apparently, looks like we got a good group here.
Good evening. Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Trent, and City Council members. I'm Jennifer Brown, the Program and Outreach Manager for the Gene Lucas Community Center, and I'm excited to give you a project overview and share some updates and let you know what's going on at the GLC. So in 2017, the Mcclain Foundation received a conditional use permit from the city for the Mcclain campus. The first phase of the project is the construction of the Gene Lucas Community Center, and it's located on Newburgh Road behind the park, Newburgh Park, and the project is a grant to the community and has been fully funded by the Mcclain Foundation. The project is estimated $11 million investment into the community. So the GLC is located on a 36.7 acre lot. The 23,000 square foot center will house the Mcclain Foundation offices, GLC staff offices, and the Fortuna Senior Center. And 12,000 square feet of the building is dedicated to community programs, classes, and services. So this is the back side of the building, and before it was painted, obviously. It's painted now. And so right here is the Fortuna Senior Center. Here is the Mcclain Foundation, GLC staff, and then the central part is dedicated to programming. The building includes a commercial kitchen, dining hall, and numerous multi-purpose rooms and classrooms. And rentals for events will be available in 2020. So I'm going to go over some of the on-site and off-site improvements currently underway. So 260 parking spaces are going to be installed with LED lighting as well. And additional drainage capacity has been added for Elizabeth Barkus Way. And stormwater runoff will be diverted to the wetlands on site, which are back here. Also, a public access ADA compliant trail is being added to Newburgh Road, and it'll connect to Newburgh Park so you don't have to walk in the road to get between the two. A total of 5.5 acres of wetlands are on the site. Many waterfowl and critters have been spotted in the wetlands, including ducks, herons, deer, and even otter prints, and that's what inspired our Ollie the otter. So this was in the winter time, so wetlands, they drain slowly, and usually in the summer they're dry. But this was them at pretty much full capacity here. And this is a 1 mile walking trail that's partial ADA, that's gravel, that goes throughout the wetlands. And a four-way stop will be installed at Newburgh Road and Roederville Road with a left turn pocket to make it safer for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. So I'm sure all of us have been stuck here. So the four-way stop will be completed around here. So the Gene Lucas Community Center is dedicated to supporting all people in the Eel River Valley in the pursuit of art, education, and health and wellness. The GLC is more than just a recreation center. It's a place to cultivate a healthier community by providing services and expanding opportunities for everyone. We want you to meet your neighbor. We want to grow together as a community, and we want to bring services to Fortuna and offer them in one central location. That's the heart of the GLC, is we want to be the gathering place to socialize, connect, learn, and just be. The Just Be is a really big part. I don't know of any community center in Humboldt or neighboring counties that have 36 acres on them to enjoy, and we have 5.5 of the wetlands, which will never be developed on, and so it's a part where you can take classes, you can participate in the programming, or you can just go on a walk and watch the animals and just enjoy yourself. So we're really excited about the Just Be part. The GLC needs community partners to thrive, and I'm going to share some examples on how this is already underway at the Mcclain campus. So the first is the Sunrise Rotary has donated 32 cherry trees for a cherry tree grove. It will be installed by Sunrise Rotary in September and is located next to the Fortuna Senior Center wing. The second project that we're really excited about is Mcclain Foundation is working with Hardcar on their 22 Trees event. We are installing a veterans redwood grove with coastal redwoods and giant sequoias. This project brings awareness to the roughly 22 veteran suicides that are committed every day in the United States. Another example is a local resident has donated redwood planks that floated down the Eel River Valley during the 1964 flood for design work inside and outside of the building. And a local business, Redwood Humboldt, is fabricating several benches and furniture items from Mcclain wood and redwood. And he's also donating some wood for a table from the salvaged Fortuna bowling alley. So that'll be pretty cool. And there's a lot more projects that are underway we just don't have time to go over. So the Multi-Generational Center is on Newburgh, and it served the community several years with programming and classes, and it's closing, and the staff and the successful programs will be moved to the GLC. So some of those classes were the kids cooking, the conversational Spanish, and science club. And we're also going to be adding some new programming into 2019-2020, including the free family movie and game nights, and also yoga and Zumba. So we also have numerous community partners that will be offering programs and services at the center. So a little bit of overview. College of the Redwoods Adult Education Program offers free classes, non-credit to 18 and over. They pay their instructors, and they have satellite classes all over Humboldt County and Del Norte. And right now they're teaching at the MGC. We have 3 classes. But what's exciting about the center is we're talking about having 10 to 15 classes next year that are all free. We're also going to be in high school equivalency exam testing center, and CR will pay for your testing if you go through the center. So that's pretty exciting. Paso a Paso is through Redwood Memorial and St. Joe's. It's free programming to support Spanish-speaking women and their families. Remy Vista is leasing a part of the offices there, and they offer counseling, and then First 5 has playgroup. So these are some great community partners that are bringing all their services to a central location, and we're hoping that there'll be some cross use of people from CR, maybe participating in First 5, and so on. So we also have a lot of opportunities for you to become involved at the center. We need volunteers, so we need help with administration, marketing. You can even teach a class if you're talented and just want to spend time there. We also have contract instructor opportunities, and a contract instructor is someone who teaches a class and they get to keep a percentage of the ticket sales. So we do a 60-40 split where the instructor keeps 60% of the sales. So if you're interested, please let us know. We're collecting people now to teach and also to volunteer. So the community center, the GLC, is a nonprofit, and we really need the community's investment to be successful. We also really want to make sure that our classes are affordable and low cost or free, and so to keep ticket prices down, we really need program sponsorship and donations. The MGC had a lot of generous sponsors in the past, including Grocery Outlet, Safeway, Fat Ann's, Ace Hardware, Fabusco. So we are looking for those program sponsors, and we're working on a program sponsor platform. So if you want more information, please contact us for that. So we're still under construction. We don't know when we're opening, but we are definitely going to be open by December. So our first main event is the December 7th GLC Open House and also the Mcclain Foundation's 20th anniversary celebration. It's a free family fun event, and we're going to have a tree lighting, dance demonstration, live music, and refreshments. So we hope to see you guys there. And then the second event is the December 14th GLC Stocking Stuffer Boutique, previously held at the MGC for about 3 years, and now it'll be going to the GLC, where you can, purchase a table and sell your wares for the holidays. And with that, that's what's kind of going on. The paving project, that will start in September. So the whole, that includes the four-way stop, the ADA, and the parking spaces. That development starts in September and is planned to be concluded in November. So that's the activity you're going to start seeing next. So I can answer any questions, or I thank you for your time.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, now is the time for oral comments from the public for anything that is not on the agenda tonight. Please be advised that we can't address anything that's not on the agenda, but you do have 3 minutes if you would like to come and talk to the council.
Good evening, honorable council members and staff. First, about 2 weeks ago, we received a bill from the city for $75. It was in reference to an ordinance that was established apparently back in '93 on how the police department can charge a fee to homeowners if their alarm goes off a certain number of times and officers are dispatched or something to that effect. Needless to say, I am against such a charge. I'm not blaming anybody. I simply want this to be fixed. As it stands now, the charge is unfair. And we did not receive a follow-up phone call from the police department letting us know that they went by the house and checked the windows and our front door. That would have been nice. So question, when and how long has this ordinance been implemented? How many businesses and other homes have been charged? And I've been told by a reliable source that at least 2 of our local businesses have their alarms go off with some degree of regularity. Have they been fined every time? In my opinion, this ordinance is simply a way to put an added tax on the citizens. I am hopeful that the City Council will look into the ordinance and fix it. If not, then it would be only fair to start enforcing all our ordinances with the same amount of enthusiasm. Second, I would like to hear an update on our needle exchange programs. Is it working? How many needles have been turned into the drop box? How many needles have been found in the city? And what is the location the needles were found? Were they found in the park, back alley, street, etc.? I thank the council and staff for your patience and consideration on these matters of concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we will move on to our first agenda item. Discussion update on labor negotiations between the Fortuna Police Employees Association and the City of Fortuna.
So, thank you, Mayor Long. At the request of the mayor, there's been a lot of interest in this subject, and obviously it's something that's very important to the city. And so Mayor Long asked that I put together a presentation to just give a quick summary of what the status of the negotiations are and a little bit about the background, the chronology, and then just a kind of an overview of the status of the negotiations and some of the budget implications of that. And so the city has a couple of bargaining units. One is the Fortuna Employees Association, which is primarily public works employees and other employees other than the police. And then there's the Fortuna Police Employees Association. And there's also the unrepresented, which are management and exempt employees that aren't really a bargaining unit, but the council typically deals with them. There's actually an agenda item on here for unrepresented employees, but they're not represented and they don't bargain, but they do receive typically the same increases that the Fortuna Employees Association have. So just a little bit on the background. Negotiations have primarily commenced over the last 3 months. I was the negotiator that was designated on behalf of the city, and there's actually a committee of negotiators that were appointed by the Fpga. And I think there was about 3 or 4 fairly active members of that, and there was a little bit of transition in the middle. And we worked diligently to consider the request of the association and make it include increases where appropriate and where they could be afforded by the city. And I think one of the good things that we had in this negotiation, I think we had really good, clear communications, and we provided a lot of relevant financial information to the Fpga. So there's a lot of information exchange both from the association regarding, their requests and why they thought they were warranted, and then information back from the city on, how, what are our limitations on budget, what are our funding sources and things like that. So in my opinion, I think it was a very good transfer of information, and we had very clear communication, and both sides had their questions answered. Some of the challenges, the city faces a lot of challenges, and primarily they're budget related. There's an unfunded pension liability. Essentially, we have a bill that is due to PERS. The costs of employee pensions for current and retired employees continues to change depending on how well PERS does in the market. And so essentially PERS sends the city an amount every year. They update it and tell the city how much they owe. And I have a sheet that I'll show after this slide that shows that amount. And it's a really big consideration because it's a big number relative to the city budget, and one that it's important to understand. We're seeing increasing insurance costs. We're not only for workers' comp liability and property insurance, but we're also seeing increase to healthcare insurance. And right now, to insure an employee and a family, it's about $26,000 per year. Another challenge that we have is Measure E is it's a general fund source, but it's temporary and it sunsets in 2025, and there's multiple promised uses, including public safety, recreation and parks, and infrastructure. And so there's a lot of work that went into Measure E, and there's a advisory committee, it's known as a Measure E committee, that takes requests for that money, and they provide the city council with a recommendation as to how those monies are spent. And that committee is really intended to be the voice of the public to make sure that the city council is spending that money correctly, or not correctly, but consistent with the intention of that tax measure. And so I think that's really important that we do have a public process, and typically the council has gone with the recommendations from that committee each time they've been presented to the council. One of the interesting things about Measure E is it is picking up a portion of the general fund deficit. Right in the current fiscal year, it's expected to absorb about $393,000 per year of general fund deficit. And we're also seeing, another challenge is we're seeing sales tax revenues decreasing. I think this year we saw a decrease, or the latest quarter, about 4%, Aaron, somewhere between 4 and 7% is what we're looking at right now. And so sales tax is the primary funding source for the city, and we're seeing decreases in sales tax right now. And there's been a trend that's been going that way for the last few quarters. So I mentioned the PERS unfunded liability. You can see there's a column on the left with the fiscal year, and that's the required annual payment that's required to cover the pension liability. And so this is the second column here. You can see it starts in 17-18 and goes all the way to 2046 and 2047. And so this is, my estimation, this is probably one of the primary causes for the city having any kind of a deficit with the general fund. And you can see in 17-18, the amount we had to pay annually was $410,000. You can see in 19-20, it's $636. It keeps going up almost in a bell-shaped curve. You can see in 30-31, it's expected our additional payment. This is not for our regular payment. This additional payment is about $1 million. And then slowly it starts to come back down starting in 2034 and 35. And I think this is an important number to look at here. Our Measure E sales tax expires in 2025, and you can see that 4 years from now when that happens, we'll be paying approximately 200,000 or a little more than 200,000 than we are now. So this is this slide explains what our total liability is. The fun thing about this is it changes. So every time PERS gives an update of what their discount rate or how much they're making on that money, then the total amount that we owe changes. And so our bill for the PERS unfunded pension liability could go up or down depending on what they're realizing in the market. So a good, if their investments do well, we pay more. If they do poorly, if they do well, we could potentially pay less. And if they do poorly, then we end up paying more. And I think what you can see here, this was the numbers in the top rows are for the 16-17. You can see the miscellaneous plan. That's for employees other than the police. The police plan, the cost of the police plan, the portion of the unfunded liability for the safety plan is that amount. It was this amount in 2016-17. So 4.8 million for miscellaneous, all the other employees but the police, and for the police alone, it's about 3.5 million. With the projection for 17-18 in a reduced discount rate, you can see that the portion of unfunded liability went from roughly 3.6 million to about 4 million. So just 1 year, we saw an increased liability to the city for that much without the city having any kind of action or ability to change that. So just a quick outline of our tentative agreement with the Fpga. There's been a lot of information that's out there, and these are really bullet point summary facts from what the proposed MOU is that we have offered. It includes the following. It would be a contract length of 3 years. It would run from 1920 through 2021 and 22. It includes a 4% cost of living adjustment in the first year, a 3% in the second year, and a 2% in the third year. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, that healthcare insurance costs are going up, and so the insurance split would be about per the new MOU would be 85% paid by the city and 15% paid by the employee. And currently, in the past, there was a flat rate and then there was a percentage, but through the last few MOUs, there was the increased was picked up by the city. So the effective rate that we had we had in the last MOU was approximately 92 to 8. So this 85-15 insurance split represents an increase to the employees, and I think that's one of the important things to understand. It does. That goes into effect the first year of the MOU. So that was one of the reasons for including a 4% cost of living adjustment in the first years, in an effort to make sure that no employees had any kind of a net loss for the increased pickup of the insurance split. It also increased slightly the dispatch supervisor incentive to $32.50 a year. It increases a K-9 officer incentive to $6,000 per year. Those are both pretty small increases over what they were existing. It compensates dispatchers for training new dispatchers. It provides them 50 cents an hour more for the time that they're training. It allows 90% of accrued vacation to be sold back to the city and cashed out, essentially. It adds an incentive for $100 per month for officers or sergeants who obtain a bilingual certificate. And then one of the things that it included is it reduced the number of years that you'd have to work here to get the higher vacation total. So the current MOU had for years 1 through 6, you get 2 weeks, but it was and 7 through 11, you get 3 weeks. And sorry, I lost it. And anyway, it reduced the number of years by 1 year that you needed to accrue the same number of vacations. So essentially, in the first step, you'd have 2 weeks. Second step, you have 3. The second step, you have 4. So employees don't have to work so long to get that vacation benefit. And I think this is a good one. It really matches up well with what other agencies are doing for vacation. And there were some other smaller incentives that were also included in there. So what does that mean? What does that mean for our employees? It's a pretty complicated sheet. I may need help from our finance director to help explain it, but I'm going to do my best here. So you can see right now on this left column, it includes year 1, year 2, and year 3, and it applies the cost of living adjustment for each one of those years. So in the first year that you'd have, and so the columns that we have, so we have the position. So you can see we characterize the positions. We have a sergeant position, police officer, dispatcher, records clerk, and community services officer. And so the totals in these rows represent an average. So we have the hourly pay rate, the average hourly pay rate, the average incentive cost per hour, the average base pay without incentives. This would represent the cost of living adjustment, the 4%. then this is the cost for the increased healthcare cost over the current amount, and then the difference per hour. And then ultimately what you have here is what the net difference in pay would be for the year. So if you look at a sergeant, you know, I think it's important to understand here that you can see it's about 80 cents an hour that healthcare cost increased over what it is now. And so you can see that, and then you can see the net hourly increase in this first year. And again, these first year amounts are going to be lower, but they do represent an increase for all of the position except one. And that one position is the records clerk. And that was, you know, one of the decisions to move forward with a percentage. You know, it typically benefits the higher paid employees more, but it does hurt the lower employees. And so everybody in the department would see an increase. There's one employee, the records clerk, which would see a decrease. And that's something we really wanted to avoid. And anyway, that's where we ended up with our final offer. But the net decrease would be $112 per year on average for the records clerk. So you can see in the first year, the annual difference would be, the average for a sergeant would be an $805 increase. The average increase for a police officer would be $784. The average for a dispatcher would be $1,000. The records clerk would be a decrease of $112, and the average community services officer would be $821. After that first year and most of the healthcare cost shift is done, you can see a more substantial increase, even though the COLA is a lower percentage. The second year includes a 3% COLA, and you can see that the annual amount that the different positions, a sergeant would see approximately a $2,600 increase, officer $2,300 increase after 2 years, dispatcher $2,300, records clerk $1,000, and community services officer $2,000. And then in year 3, you can see what the difference would be over the current salary. So an increase to of $3,900 for a sergeant, $3,300 for an officer. The dispatch would be $3,254, records clerk $1,846, and a community service officer $2,800 roughly. So what does this cost the city? What does this mean to the budget? This is really just a summary with what the total cost would be to the city. And so you can see on the line for each fiscal year, and Aaron, correct me if this is the difference from the last fiscal year, which is 18-19. So the increase to payroll as a result of the COLA and just the cost of living expense, it'd be an increase to payroll of $68,000 the first year, but the city would, there would be a reduction in the city's portion of the healthcare cost by $23,000. So salaries would go up for the 17 Fpga members, about $68,000, but the cost of healthcare, this would be absorbed by the members, $23,000. The second year, $119,000 would be added to payroll roughly, and the city's contribution, assuming a 3% increase, would be reduced by about $13,000. And then year 3, the payroll would be increased by $153,000, and the cost of the healthcare share from the employees would be $3,000. So you see over a period of 3 years, $300,000 more is going to go to the roughly 17 members of the Fpga. So, you know, it might not seem like a lot for the employees or maybe one person in the first year, but as a whole, it's a significant amount of money to go towards increases. So there's a lot that I could put here. I'm just things about the future considerations. You know, I think there was a real effort to have a salary increase that, you know, a salary increase that the budget could allow, and a reasonable increase consistent with what we may be seeing across the industry. A big challenge is the police industry. They're seeing staffing shortfalls across the country, and that's Humboldt County's not immune from that. There are other communities that are paying, I believe Eureka's paying $30,000 for a signing bonus. I think Arcata was paying $15,000. I can't remember how much the sheriff's paying, but it's extremely competitive. In trying to put something together here and a good offer for our employees, we very much have to consider the cost of retention and what it's going to take to keep employees. But we also have to work within our budget constraints. And so I think, you know, that's something that we've heard interest expressed from our employees, and that's something we really want to do, is continue to think about ways that we can improve retention and ways that we can make the job better for our employees, maybe the work environment, how we can improve management to make that better, and also salary increases. So I think that's something you're going to see more of in the future. We've heard from the Fpga that they'd really like to work with us on retention issues, and that's something that we're gonna go after vigorously. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you need additional information, Aaron, I could provide that for you.
Anyone have questions for Merritt at this time? No? Does anyone from the public wish to comment?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. First, I want to thank Merritt. I've been involved in the negotiation process as the president of the Fpga for several years, and this is the first time that we haven't had to have a mediator come in to help us talk. He's been very, in my opinion, very transparent. So I appreciate that, and Sienna for her help, and Aaron for his help too. First off, I want to thank you guys for the hard job you have. I understand that you have a responsibility to make sure that the city remains fiscally sound, and I think that's very important. But we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're providing our community with adequate law enforcement coverage. I'm here today to express concerns for the staffing levels that our police department is currently facing. Currently, we're down 3 officers, and we'll be down another officer next month. We just had to extend the application period for our officer position because we got 3 applicants. That's not enough. Last time we had an opening, we got 3 applicants. One of those applicants made it beyond the interview process, and that applicant failed out of backgrounds. We got no one. Now we're back to where we started. So why are we receiving a limited number of applicants? We believe it's because we are unable to compete with our neighboring agencies, on top of the very significant hiring bonuses that Merritt mentioned. Officers starting at the sheriff's office, for example, they will start making $3.57 an hour more than our officers start, and they'll top out making $6 an hour more, doing exactly the same job. Eureka PD, they'll start out making $5.16 an hour more and top out making $7 an hour more. One may argue that they handle more calls, which is true. But they also have very significant staffing numbers that give them 2 to 4 times the number of staffing that we have on a shift. One may also argue that their insurance benefits are cheaper, which is true to an extent, but it's also important to realize that several of our members do and have the ability to opt out of medical benefits, so that's really not a thing. We have a very significant portion of our members that can opt out because their spouse carries medical benefits, or they may have benefits through the VA. By opting out, if they went to those other agencies, they get an even higher opt-out pay there on top of the salary. Currently, the Academy at College of Redwood started with 24 cadets, and last week they were down to 21. Of these 21, 13 of them are already being sponsored by local agencies, and 5 additional are in backgrounds with another agency. That leaves 3, maybe the 3 that applied, I don't know. So it's not even realistic, if it were those 3 that applied, which I don't think it is, it's not realistic that all 3 would even make it through a background process, leaving us still short this month, and then even shorter with another officer leaving next month. It's important to recognize, and correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers here, the city currently has a general fund budget of $5.9 million and a general fund reserve, money in the savings account, of $4.9 million. While we can all agree that it's important to have extra money in the savings account for that rainy day when the car breaks down, we need to invest the money to keep our people on the street. Right now, our department's breaking down, and we're going to be in big trouble here shortly, and spending a lot more down the road. Hiring officers is not cheap. According to the National Police Foundation, it costs approximately $100,000 to hire, equip, and train a new officer, and that's a large sum of money that we're just essentially throwing away because people are leaving and going to other agencies with that training that we paid for. I know you guys have a closed session meeting tonight, our closed session topic tonight, to discuss negotiations, and I would ask that you take a look at what is possible and steps you can do to improve our retention. This month alone, our officers will be forced to work more than 500 hours of overtime, and with another officer leaving next month, that's another 40 hours of overtime a week on top of that. Additionally, we're dealing with our citizens during the worst time of their lives. They're experiencing things that nobody wants to experience. Our officers are seeing people in distress. They're seeing assault victims. They're seeing dead and dying people weekly. It happens here, it happens everywhere. And these officers need time to take time off and decompress with their families, to take vacation, and kind of separate themselves from the job so they don't go crazy. And with the overtime requirements, we can't take vacation, we can't take time off. So that we need to truly do what we can to get officers back on the street. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gabe Charlton. I'm a resident of Fortuna, member of the Fortuna Police Employees Association, and City of Fortuna employee for over 10 years. I've chosen to speak today because I want to express my frustration, disappointment toward our elected council. Excluding the police chief and the lieutenant, there are 5 officers of an allotted 17 positions that have 10 years or more of service with the Fortuna Police Department, and one of those is leaving the department in September. There are 2 officers with 9 years, 2 with 6 years, and the remaining 5 have 3 years or less. And let's not forget that we have 3 vacancies, and only 3 applications were submitted to the city. The Fortuna Police Department simply cannot compete with other local agencies who offer higher pay, including signing bonuses and better opportunities. Recruitment out of the academy is nearly impossible. There are fewer cadets entering the law enforcement field, and the majority of the cadets in the academy are already employed by agencies who are paying them while they are attending the academy. Yet the council refuses to negotiate a competing compensation for our employees. Retention of employees does not appear important, and you're willing to continue the trend that Fortuna PD is a training ground for officers to move on to higher paying agencies in the county. Well, this is a problem. You were elected to speak for the people in the community, and I'm sure the community would like a fully staffed police department. A department with experienced officers who genuinely care about their community and aren't just looking for a stepping stone. I also want to make something perfectly clear. The Fpga was not asking for the moon in a pay raise. In fact, the amount that we asked for did not receive, the employees were still going to be paid on average 10% less than any other agencies in the county. Yet you would not negotiate any further, stating you were done, all over 3%. With the increase in our city's health insurance, some of our employees will see a whopping 10 cents an hour increase. Hey, I guess something is better than nothing, right? Police work throughout the nation has changed dramatically since I began my career in 2004. When I started, the #1 killer for officers were vehicle collisions. That has since changed. In the last 3 years, more officers have been killed by gunfire, and guess what? It could happen here. As you know, many laws have changed in California. Suspects are being arrested for crimes simply booked into jail and released almost as fast as they get there. Unless a person commits a violent felony, they're being released from jail with a piece of paper telling them when to be in court. And shocker, most don't show up. Is this frustrating? Absolutely. Not only do the police officers who spend hours putting together the best investigation they possibly can to send to the prosecution, but it's also frustrating for the citizen who is just the victim of a burglary where their home and privacy were violated, and many of their personal belongings are now forever gone. Are these changes in law going to change the way I do police work? No. I'm still going to do the best investigation that I can to bring some justice to our community. I'll still hold my officers at a high standard to do as thorough of an investigation as they can. But will I continue to serve the public in Fortuna? Police work is a thankless job. I knew that when I began my career, and I'm okay with it. But feeling unappreciated by my employer, that's a tough pill to swallow. But let's be honest, if the department is spending countless hours continually training new officers and losing experienced ones, the police department will never be able to fully meet the expectations of the citizens in our community. Your focus should be on retention of employees and realize how important that is to the city. The amount of money the city spends on hiring new officers, putting them through required testing and training, and paying other officers overtime to fill the vacancies is atrocious. In closing, congratulations. City Council, you win again. The Fortuna Police Employees Association voted to accept your less than fair offer by 1 vote. It was decided the gamble of spending thousands of our own dollars for a third party to audit and report to the City of Fortuna that the City of Fortuna does have money, which we already know, and the FPA members are understaffed and underpaid, which we already know, was not worth it because the rules still state that the council can do nothing and shrug their shoulders. Too much money for a small association to waste on deaf ears. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Ibarra. I'm a resident of Fortuna. I want to address this to the city manager. If I understand correctly, okay, Mayor, I've got a question about his presentation. You know, initially when Measure E was sold to the community, it was sold as funding public safety. And then there was smoke and mirrors going on, and finally when it made it to the ballot, it was public safety, parks and recreation, and public works. Well, there's a lot of public works projects going on right now. They're commendable, it's great, but we're losing officers. I'm involved in the Neighborhood Watch program here in the city, trying to start up new groups. They're useless if you don't have the officers. They're not a vigilante group. You know, they're there to observe and report. But if we don't have the officers to respond, those groups are useless. So the question I have, if I understand this correctly, nearly $400,000 of Measure E money went to pay CalPERS pensions. Is that correct?
No. So I'll answer one thing, and I'll let Merritt take one, and then Aaron can take the 393, almost $400,000. I personally spent hundreds of hours getting Measure E passed. I walked and I knocked on doors and I talked to people and I made presentations and I gave presentations because I care about this community and I care about the police department. This is a brochure that I made for Measure E, and it talks about what Measure E is going to do. And if you read this brochure, it talks about police, but it also talks about parks, infrastructure, programs for youth and seniors. So there was no smoke and mirrors. I knocked on doors, I handed out this brochure, and I made it very clear where the money was going to go. The majority of the money is going to the police department, except for one instance where, and the other thing that we talked about in these presentations was when the city was eligible for grants, many times we needed a city match or we lost millions of dollars. So we did use a portion of Measure E for the city match for a grant that got this city millions of dollars. Those infrastructure projects that you are talking about, many of them, most of them, are being done with grants of millions of dollars that you can thank Merritt Perry for bringing into the city. And I'll let him explain some of those projects and where the money came from. But Measure E is being used exactly for what it was intended to use, for exactly what I told the public it was going to be used for. And I have all the brochures and all of the stuff to show that to you if you need to see it.
Mayor, I've got that brochure, but I've also got copies of the stuff that was circulated to the citizens before that. And so there was a lot of confusion before it went to the ballot about.
There shouldn't have been, because I was in charge of it and I put all the information out there, and there was never confusion on my
You weren't
part.
the only one out there passing out information.
Well, the information that was being passed out should have came from the Measure E committee. And if it wasn't, I can't help that.
Well, that committee didn't. Well,
And there's language that was on the ballot measure as well, so people could go back and look what it says. And I think it's important to recognize that there's a very public process for the use of those Measure E funds. There are a number of members of the public who are volunteering for the Citizens Advisory, the Advisory Committee for Measure E. And so, you know, I'm going to ask our finance director to reiterate the positions that are funded by Measure E and the portion, and maybe go a little bit over the portion of the deficit that, you know, may be attributed to the police department, but it's a significant number, more than it's going to other projects. But none of these concerns have been raised to the Citizens Advisory Committee. And so, you know, hearing it now after the fact, after there's been projects approved, you know, really the public process, there is a very public and open process that would be the most appropriate for that kind of comment. So,
well, my only concern is that we are losing officers and that you really need to take a closer look at what you're doing, because you're training officers to leave. And that's exactly what you're doing, okay? And that's basically all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Anyone
Aaron?
else? Did anybody want to, did you want to answer the $393,000 deficit?
So the general fund had a recurring deficit of about $393,000 from the last few years that have continued to carry forward. Measure E has picked that up. About 56% of the general fund goes towards police, and so we estimate about 56% of that, almost 400,000, goes towards police, so roughly 200,000.
and Aaron, if you could just summarize how much on an annual basis is going for other police, the funded positions of Measure E on a regular and ongoing basis?
So we have 2 police officer positions that are funded by Measure E, and then a community services officer. Their salaries are alone are projected at $361,000 for this next fiscal year.
As well as the K-9
The K-9 program is also funded.
and the code compliance officer?
Co-compliance officer as well, yes.
Anyone else have comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. Does anyone from the council wish to say anything? I have a whole list, so if somebody else wants to go first, you can go that. First off, public safety is not just police. It's also safe drinking water, sanitary sewer disposal, streets, safe parks for youth and families, and more. So when the city council's job is public safety, it's not just our police department. Although without our police department, we're not going to feel very safe. I am so disappointed in the Facebook approach. It was misleading and uncalled for, dividing the department and the city. You are professionals and leaders, and this tactic was unprofessional and detrimental to your cause. The post today was totally misleading and did not represent the actual raises that you were given department-wide, which Merritt had to put together a slideshow at the last minute to show the public that yes, you are getting more money. Is it as much as the other agencies? No. Is it what we have? Yes. You have intentionally created speculation regarding which council members support the PD and which don't. You referred to meetings behind closed doors. You guys know better than that. All negotiations are behind closed doors. You make it sound like we did something that was not okay, which we did not. The entire city council supports the police department. When you don't give your child everything they want, does it mean you don't love them or support them? When my kids were little, they wanted to go on these extravagant vacations because that's what their friends were doing. And I had to tell them, we don't have enough money to go on that vacation. So either they have more money than us or they're not managing their money well, but we can't do it. Did it mean I did not love them or care about them? Absolutely not. I'm disappointed that you didn't invite Aaron or Merritt into your group with all of your members so that they could explain what was actually taking place, what was actually happening with insurances and raises and all of that, and so that each person had the opportunity to ask questions of the people who had the answers. Budgets are difficult and the bottom line is hard to understand. I think it would have just been advantageous if you guys had done that. Aaron covered some of the stuff I was going to cover that says what Measure E has done for the police department. And don't forget that we also have Measure Z, which is a drug task force officer and a school resource officer. Without Measure Z and Measure E, we were going to be in a lot more trouble than we are in right now. So, and you guys can come up at the podium if you have an answer to this question. What would you like the city to cut in order to increase the budget for the PD? And I'd like the same answer from the public that jumped in on Facebook and put their 2 cents in without having any facts. What is it that we can cut? And I'm serious, because I don't have an answer and I don't know what that is. And we have struggled with the budget up here all year. We've had several meetings and we can't find anything else to cut either. So if you guys have ideas, you need to give them to us. You need to bring them forward. And I don't know that spending all of our reserves is the answer. What are we going to do when sales tax keeps dropping and property tax keeps dropping and Measure E maybe doesn't pass because it sunsets? Then what do we do? Other agencies in the county also have openings. Why is that? Are they not paying enough? Are they a training ground? I don't think you can just say that we have openings because we don't pay enough. The environment in Fortuna is a whole lot better than having to do calls in Eureka or the Sheriff's Department, as far as the type of calls, the amount of calls, those things. That's your opinion. I'm giving mine. You had your turn. The bottom line is Sacramento has made laws and voters have jumped in and voted for them that have made your job, a difficult job already, almost impossible to do. You can come up here and yell at us, but we didn't make those laws. We didn't introduce those laws, and I doubt that any of us voted for those laws. We need to turn it around in Sacramento, and I know that the Police Chiefs Association is working on that. But until that happens, I can't make those people that you take to jail stay there. Though most of them deserve it, there's no doubt about it, and I feel for you because it's that rotating, revolving door that has to be so frustrating for you guys. The bottom line is, we wholeheartedly support you guys. And at the end of the day, we want you to go home to your families. We want you to be safe and be able to do your jobs. If you guys can come up with more ideas, besides bashing the council on Facebook and putting out information that's really, really misleading, I would love to hear it, and I'm really serious. But you didn't accomplish a thing by taking that approach, except making the community angry, making the council more frustrated than we already were, and making your own people frustrated, bringing down the morale in your own department. Why would you do that? You guys are smarter than that. You are better than that. So in the future, I hope that you choose to take a different approach and that we can figure out a way to work with you guys to keep you here. Anybody else? And I'm sorry I got emotional, but I care about every single one of you guys. And this is a hard place to be up here, and I know it's a hard place to be out there. So we have to figure out a way to work together better. Who said that? Yes.
As far as what you mentioned about making sure our members were aware, Merritt and Aaron certainly could have came. I didn't know you guys wanted to. I would love to have you there. I do thank Aaron for taking the time last week to literally take every single one of our members and show them what their insurance increase is going to be, what their actual pay increase is going to be, and that got us to where we were. We voted on the same exact thing 2 weeks prior, and it was a unanimous no. So it went to our members. They know what they were going to get, and that's partly what got us there. So it's not like we're hiding information from them. Each person got all of their stuff. The second thing, as far as the calls we handle the same exact calls as Eureka. We have the same exact crime in Eureka. A standard shift in Eureka has 8 officers on. We have 2. It's a lot slower here, absolutely. But speaking to somebody who works in Eureka at the police department, if we had the number of officers on there, we could certainly handle the call volume they have. We just don't have the officers. We don't have the call volume. So, and then I would also encourage, I can't remember the last time any of you council members came on a ride along.
I've done it.
There's been an inquiry. It's been a while maybe, or maybe I just wasn't working. Come ride with us.
I went with Justin.
See what we deal with. It's ugly out there. You know, before I started this job, Fortuna looks like the friendly city. And once you've spent even 12 hours in a patrol car, Fortuna's not the friendly city. We got problems. So I just hope that, I understand you maybe don't like the Facebook approach. It wasn't an intention to attack any specific council member or even the council as a whole. It was just to truly let our public know what's going on. You guys have the power. We have no power. You guys can impose a contract on us. That's why we ended up voting the way we did, because what it's going to get us. So, but take the time to truly look at recruitment. Merritt's agreed to take the time to see what we can do. Are there places we can cut? I'm sure there's places we can cut. I've talked to a couple council members about areas that can be cut. Just hope that you guys have an open mind, and hopefully we can come up with a solution together. Thank you.
So Charles, do you honestly think that Facebook approach accomplished anything good?
It got the public talking. That's our only public.
It got the public talking, but not about the facts. So maybe you could go back and redo your Facebook post.
There's no misleading facts in there. And if there was, I would.
Charles.
I'm not going to argue with you, but I would encourage Merritt or even you. We can sit down and go through everything that was posted. And
I read what was posted. It was very misleading. And all you accomplished was getting council bashing. How did that help? How did that help?
we didn't do the council bashing, but
Oh, some of your, you got to go read it. Some of your employees,
we can.
yeah, some of your employees made comments on there,
Let's have a conversation.
not professional. That's what I'm saying. Anyone else want to say anything now that I've said my piece? You are welcome to come up here.
Honorable Mayor, council members, staff, my name is Walt Wilson. I am chairman of the Measure E Oversight Committee. I was also a member of the Let's Get the Measure E passed, and I know what we promised the public. And I also know that the council is living up to what we promised the public. Now, we have 5 or 6 meetings a year, the Oversight Committee. They are open. We do not have closed meetings. I have yet to see a police officer at one of our meetings. And I would like to invite Charles, the entire police department for that matter, to attend our meetings. I mean, we aren't mind readers. We can only deal with what's placed in front of us. The police department obviously is very upset. I think we have the best police department in the territory. Right now, they're really upset. And this picking on Measure E is, it's just beyond me. It's way off the mark. So please come to our meetings. Tell us what you want. You know, make your requests. We've never had a request. So what we recommend to the council is what is put in front of us, and that we determine to be in line with the meaning, the intent of Measure E. So come to our meetings. Charles, our next meeting is Tuesday, September 17th, right here at 5:30. I'd like to see you there.
Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the next item on our agenda.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, sorry. I thought I asked you guys and you said nothing. Oh, now this is now. Okay, go ahead.
A lot of this Facebook stuff was very hard for me too, because I work my butt off for the police department. I belong to the Northern California Public Safety Committee. I represent the Northern Division on Law Enforcement in Sacramento, 4 meetings a year, fight for rights for the police officers. I tried my hardest, right along with Sue, going around getting Measure E passed. Every single year, I fight for our drug task force officer and our school resource officer that we wouldn't have if I didn't go to those meetings. I really feel, I don't like to brag on stuff that I do, so I don't say a lot of this stuff, but I 100% support our police department. And it's very hurtful to me to hear that I don't care about them. I come from a law enforcement family. I have my whole life, clear from my dad to my children, are all in law enforcement. You guys have a terrible job, especially the way it is right now. It's awful to see what you guys are going through. You are definitely underpaid, 100%. I've been talking a little bit with Charles, I've been talking a little bit with the city manager about how maybe we can reorganize the police department to get rid of some areas that maybe we don't need, to redo stuff, to bring our wages up. We need to be in the same ballpark. We will never be equal. We're not the same size cities, we're not the same size, but we do need to be in the ballpark. So I would appreciate any help I can get from the police department. If you have any ideas where we can cut, what we can do, how we can change. It's a very difficult situation, the same as you guys' jobs. Your jobs are very difficult. And I have 100% respect for you. So please don't disrespect what I do up here and I try to do for you guys. That's very hurtful for me. I won't stop doing it. I will continue fighting for you in Sacramento, in Eureka, here. But help us. Help, you know, if you have any ideas on how to do something, how to increase that, where the money's going to come from. We're already giving you more money than we have. I do still feel that it's cheaper to pay more than to keep replacing, but you know, I can't do it all. So please, if you have any ideas, help us. This is very frustrating and very heartbreaking for me too.
I just wanted to say something. I was involved in Measure V and Measure E, both pretty much from the beginning through to the end. And from the beginning, it was set up to be a general tax instead of a specific tax, because a specific tax, say for the PD, would take 66% plus 1 to pass. And a general tax just requires 50% plus 1. So it was always set up to be a general tax to support multiple programs. Ideally, we have tried to support the police department with as much of Measure E as we can. And we all support the police department. Specifically myself, the father of one of your soon-to-be retired officers, hired me. My daughter went to school with the chief's son from kindergarten through high school. I've worked with a lot of the officers when I worked at the city. I support the police, believe me, but the mental gymnastics required to accomplish some of the budget things is difficult. And we would love to find a way to enhance the pay package, not just for the police, for everybody, but supporting the police and public safety is one of our big things. So I'm with everybody else. If we can work together to figure something out, if somebody's got an idea. And I would love to go on a ride-along. I haven't been on a ride-along since I was a senior in high school. So I'd call Gabe up and go with him. So, but I just want you to know that you are supported. It's figuring out how to make it happen that's the hard part. Thanks.
And I would like to continue the sentiments of our council. I do 100% support you guys. I think you have a really hard job. I had a great dialogue with one of your representatives the other day that I thought we really did see some commonalities in our ultimate goals. It's frustrating to me and to everybody in California that the insurance premiums continue to go up. That eats up most of your first year's pay. I'm frustrated with you. I didn't want that for you guys. It's hard to know how to find that sweet spot, that balance, and that way to make it all work. I promise the open-mindedness to find new money somewhere, somehow, some way. So I want to continue this dialogue. I don't want this negotiation to end and us to not talk to each other for the next 3 years. I want to continue to cooperate, and I want to continue to dialogue and to continue to discover new ways to slice up that same pie that we all have to work with. Some years I think it will show up as perception of the public that those public works side heavy projects, but I got to tell you, there's going to be other years where and hopefully if you guys can make an effort to come to Measure E with specific asks, that there's going to be some years where Measure E is going to be heavy on the police side of things, and I'm going to be grateful to accept that recommendation as well. I have asked for a ride-along. I've yet to set up my appointment with that, but I am eager to see what you guys do in the trenches. I know what you do is hard. I see the news all the time about how it's getting harder and harder and harder, and again, especially in California. I don't envy what you do on the daily. I'm interested in what you do on the daily, but I know it goes a lot unappreciated and it doesn't feel good, and I'm sorry for that. I don't want you to have the sentiment that the council doesn't support your police department or your association. We just need, I have an equal value to pay people well and do it sustainably. So how do I do that? And that's the job we've been asked to do, and this is what we came up with this time, but I want to keep the conversation going so we can continue to move forward together.
I have one more thing. Sorry. I think it actually would be very good if we could set up some sort of maybe committee between the police department, city manager, maybe a council person, I would volunteer, to maybe get together and talk about ways that you think maybe we could work together to try to come up with the money. The manager, I have some ideas on how to do cuts, how to maybe generate some money within the police department, but I don't know if they'll work. You know, I'm not there all the time, but something like that. Would anybody be interested in doing something like that? Because I would.
I think Mayor's in charge.
Oh.
Mayor Pro Tem, we have had some discussions, and it's something that I let Charles know with the Fpga, and it's something we absolutely value and want to see, and we want to improve retention. You know, can we throw money at it to make it solve itself? No, it's going to take a lot of work looking at how can we improve management, how can we improve facilities, and how can we improve pay. It has to be more than just a couple of things, and work condition. And so we do understand the challenges, and it's absolutely something that we'll be committed to doing, and I'm not sure what form that will take yet, whether it'll be kind of a staff working group together or if we'll look for a council subcommittee. I need to think about a structure that could work so that it has some real legs and can move forward. And ultimately, I think what we want is some recommendations that include the department, city staff, and maybe a council member or two, so that, you know, we take a good hard look at this and what can we do. Let's look at our problem with retention. You know, we did have a big problem with dispatch retention. Right now, I believe we're fully staffed for dispatchers. And then, you know, prior to that, we were doing pretty well with officers. We are always down a position or two, but we have lost some people. And so that's a newer thing. It hasn't been like that forever. There has been a lot of demands for overtime, but, you know, we're at the worst position that we've been at, being down 3 officers for a while. So it hasn't always been like this. This has happened in the last few months where we're really starting to see that shortfall. So anyway, we're committed to working with our police department. I think it's something that's going to take a lot of my time and effort, but I think it's important for the city. So you'll be hearing back from us on that.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I feel like
Just give one more
it
thing.
needs to be said, though. I want to commend Merritt for the negotiations through the process, the respectful dialogue that occurred throughout this whole transaction. I know it was a very slim margin of acceptance of this deal, but I don't think we'd even be here without his efforts, and I want to appreciate you for that.
You know, it's a full staff effort. I mean, communication's 2 ways. I learned a lot throughout the process, as Charles said, and I'll just reiterate it. It was really a good 2-way communication, and our city clerk and our finance director played a huge role in providing information and supporting that process. So thank you.
And so if we can keep that sort of communication going versus the Facebook communication, I would be really happy.
It's also nice to have a city manager that 100% supports our police department. Thank you, Merritt. And thank you, police department. We really do appreciate what you do. And the dispatchers, too.
They're our department, right? There's
Our officers. And you, Kedra.
Especially.
So anyway, thank you guys for coming tonight, the few of you that are still here, and I hope that we can do better going forward. Are we ready now?
I'm ready.
No more things?
No, no.
Okay.
One more thing.
All right, we have the consent calendar. We have 3 items, including city council minutes, report of disbursements, approving the annual property tax assessments for several districts. I need to abstain from F and I. Does anyone wish to pull anything else?
I would just like to say something before we approve them. I did talk to Merritt a little bit about this. These come up every year, and these are probably the one thing that I really don't understand how the fees come about, how they're based, what they are. So I would actually like to maybe have some sort of workshop and explain these a little bit more at some point, as I don't know what we're approving here.
Yeah, and maybe one of the things we could do, I mean, we went through them pretty quickly in the budget process, but, you know, maybe prior to the next year's budget, when we'll be looking at them again, we can kind of run through those and basically explain how these assessment benefit districts work. But just a real quick nutshell is you know, when there's improvements that require maintenance by city forces as a part of a subdivision, it could be a detention basin in a subdivision that needs trees trimmed, or it could be a booster pump station that's specific to just a few houses that need this extra water booster pump station to get the pressure up. Typically what is required is an engineer's report would be done by the subdivider that really develops a capital improvement program. How much is it going to cost to maintain these facilities over time? And rather than the city picking up the cost for these parcels, the added cost above what people would pay in their normal water or sewer rate, or even for storm drain purposes, it identifies, you know, what should be paid for the special service that area is getting. And so these assessment benefit districts are really just intended to cover those long-term facilities that the city maintains that are for the benefit of those parcels. And so I'd be happy to come back, at a future meeting, if you'd like to add that as one of our future meeting agenda items. I don't know when. We could do it prior to the budget. That might be the most timely. But if you feel like you want to see something sooner, we could, run through a few of them as examples and show you the engineering report all the way through with the assessments and how the values of those assessments may change. If there's more parcels contributing to the same facility, sometimes they go down. We had some in here that actually went down this year and others that increase with utility costs or other things. So we'd be happy to run through that, and let us know when you'd like to have a presentation. We can do that.
I don't think it's like top priority, but next year, before next year.
Okay.
I'm just going to have to take your
Part of the
word for
budget
it.
process.
Yeah. Start our budget meetings early.
If it was all in the budget, we might have just kind of briefed over it instead of actually looking at each one of them.
Well, looking at each one of them doesn't always make sense. I want to know how you come about those
I'm
figures.
saying we could have talked about it then,
Yeah.
but we probably were so glossy-eyed at the end of the budget that we didn't even want to talk about it.
So we'll make sure and note that, and I think maybe running through a couple of examples of some of the bigger ones, maybe a big one and a small one, or maybe one for that's water, one for sewer. We can run through an example, during the next budget process.
Okay.
Anything else on the consent calendar? All right, we need a motion.
Make a-
And the exclusion of an I.
If you make a motion when we vote, I'll abstain. from
Okay.
the part. So go ahead.
Or we'd vote on everything except those two and then come back and vote on those two.
That works too.
Yeah,
Whatever you
that's
wanna
what
do.
I was going.
Okay.
I make a motion, we approve consent calendar items 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, D, E, G, and H.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I make a motion, we approve consent calendar items F and I, 3 F and I.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm abstaining. Okay, thank you, guys. All right, our next item of business is to consider dedicating a soccer field within Newburgh Park in honor of Laszlo Lescu.
So before we hand it over to Cameron Mole, he prepared the staff report for this item. We did have some public comment and dialogue about this at a previous council meeting, and we brought it back just due to the sensitive nature. It sounds like there was some real timeliness concerns. It was our hope to do some type of dedication, but maybe wait into the future when we had a more fitting or, a more magnificent field for dedication. But, understanding the concerns of those who made the request, and upon the request of the mayor, we added it back to this agenda because I think there are some real timeliness issues that need to be addressed. So we heard those concerns at a previous meeting, and that's why we're back here tonight. With that, I'll turn it over to Cameron.
Thank you, Merritt. Good evening, City Council, Honorable Mayor. So at the April 8th Parks and Rec Commission meeting, we had a pretty good turnout of about 30 members of the public who were showing support for a possible dedication of the soccer field at Newburgh Park in honor of Laszlo Lescu. And so at the next Parks and Rec Commission meeting, which was June 10th, the Parks and Rec Commission Commission decided to take this to council for some direction as far as the dedication. And so we kind of put that off at a prior city council meeting due to the Proposition 68 grant that we were applying for and the possibility that it was going to reconfigure Newburgh Park and that potential soccer field would go away. In submitting our grant, which we submitted last week, if we're successful, it will still allow a couple soccer fields to be maintained at that same area. They wouldn't be the same size, they wouldn't be regulation size, but there could still be some fields there. And in hearing the comments from the public at that council meeting and the Parks and Rec Commission, and just hearing their comments and his history and his contributions to the city of Fortuna, soccer in the city of Fortuna, soccer in Humboldt County, his contributions as a teacher as well weigh pretty heavy. So I feel at this time it would be important that current field is not dedicated in anyone's name. Laszlo spent a lot of time on that field, his heart and soul, playing, refereeing, and coaching. So I do think it is fitting to name that field in his name, is my recommendation. And then in the future, if we are successful with the grant and we do create this huge soccer complex, then it's possible we could rename the field or other fields in his honor. But from what I understand, that was kind of his field, and that's where his heart and soul was. So I do think it fitting to name that field in his honor. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have beyond that.
Any questions for Cameron? Nothing? Any comments from the public?
I'm Erica Lesky-Williams. I reside in Guido Avenue. I just want to thank you for putting it on the agenda this evening. I'm just going to go over some highlights of my dad's career. Cameron heard them all ad nauseum, but my dad came to this country in 1956. Before then, at the age of 16, he was on the Hungarian national team, but he chose to come to America for a better life, and he found it here in Humboldt County. But what he didn't find is soccer. So he actually would go to the docks and hook up with the ships that dock there at Field's Landing and ask if anybody was up for a soccer match. And after that, the captains of the Norwegian and the German cruise ships signed up their sailors for this route who were soccer players so that lads would always have a game. So he rounded everybody up. He's not the only person. People call him the Godfather. There were a couple other people who are now deceased who were part of that. He brought the youth soccer league here in the 70s. And I didn't want my dad yelling at me, so I was not actually on one of those teams because my dad was a yeller because he was totally into the game. And then in the 80s, he brought it to high school. He won three boys league titles. Never made it all the way to the North Coast section like the current teams, but I know he was there in spirit. He was the North Coast section soccer coach of the year. He was the California coach of the year. I know the Youth Soccer League made a big celebration Lads Day, and they took pictures. He was an educator here for 30 years. Those are just a few of my dad's highlights. He refereed, he coached, and it was on that field until they let soccer be on the football field at Husky Stadium. Up until then, it was sacred. But Dad did coach. He refereed. College, he had the A license for refereeing. I found a letter hidden away that he was a national recognized referee, never really made public. I know he'd be super excited and honored if he had a whole complex named after him, but he wasn't about being showy or anything like that. So I just would like to urge you to name that field my dad's field, and if you want to, after the sign, I'll move it to the new field so we can just use the same sign. If it's anything about money, there are a lot of people that said they would throw money at a sign if you didn't want to incur any of the debt of a sign. So I know we could get people to write a check for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Any more questions or thoughts up here?
Well, I'm super excited about the project. I had only talked about a delay in an honoring circumstance of trying to do the biggest and best thing for Mr. Lescue. So moving it forward and knowing the sentiments of his family and friends, I'm excited to put his name on his field. I never played for him, played football, go figure, but he was my teacher, and I thought he was a pretty amazing guy even then. So I'm excited for it. Thanks for being here and advocating for it.
Anyone else?
I just have to say, Mr. Lescue was also my teacher, and if your grade was borderline between an A or B, if you wore a dress, you got an A. But I am not wearing a dress to his dedication at the soccer field. Sorry.
It's a B for you.
Yes, I'll take the B.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to direct staff to move forward with the dedication of the current soccer field at Newburgh Park. Return at a future city council meeting to schedule a date for the potential dedication and ribbon cutting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mayor Long, too, just one suggestion with such a colorful history and a past, maybe, a sign, I think the city could do that, but if you did want to do more, it sounds like there would be a lot of subject matter that could be appropriate for an interpretive sign, and that could be a really cool one, too. So that might be something we can consider adding if people want to make a donation and help develop a graphic for a sign with some of that, because there's a lot of history there, and it would be interesting for people, rather than just seeing the name, to be able to read a story there, too. So just a suggestion that.
He was a great guy.
I agree.
Well, it's interesting to see where soccer has gone now. Because, you know, for a while, oh, you're on the soccer team. And now it's like, oh, you're on the soccer team. And I mean, we're winning and we're going places and it's exciting, and boys and girls. So,
He always had a lot of passion for soccer.
all right. Thank you for being here again and for talking to us. All right. Next, we have establish and consider authorizing supplemental compensation and benefits for management and confidential employees. Resolution 2019-18, which was continued from our 7/15 regular council meeting.
So we have this back again. We put it in the last packet, and then we had some omissions that were made by accident. We left off some of the incentives, so it's back tonight, and it's a corrected version. The city is reaching the end of labor negotiation with the organized bargaining units, the FEA and FPA, which include all represented employees. Unrepresented employees consist of both sworn and general employees that do not engage in collective bargaining. Staff is requesting that the council consider addressing wages, benefits, and other terms and conditions of employment via the draft resolution for all the unrepresented employees as a whole. This is traditionally how the city has dealt with this in the past. The resolution recommended for approval in the staff report outlines a list of eligible employees. However, staff is recommending one of the positions, the deputy city engineer, that it doesn't include the cost of living adjustment because it was a new position that was created, and the amount for that position was considered to be what the final amount was. So you won't see that increase reflected for that position because that was what we projected. So staff is recommending that council approve resolution 2019-18, which will establish and authorize compensation and benefits for the unrepresented employees. A copy of the resolution is in the staff report. So if you have any questions regarding, you know, what's included there, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the resolution?
No.
Does anyone from the public have any comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comment.
I have one that I don't think should be on here. I don't agree with the dispatch certification. I think the dispatch certification needs to be for dispatchers. And if it doesn't just go to dispatchers, it should be something that's earned before they get it. But I do feel, though, it should be just for the dispatchers. I don't think that that certificate, if it doesn't pertain to your job, you should be getting a incentive for it.
So maybe just one comment on that, Mayor Malong, if I could just kind of respond to the comment and the reason why staff left it left it in there. So right now it includes an incentive for intermediate dispatcher certificate for non-sworn employees. So we looked at this, and this is one of the things that we did consider. And the question that staff really asked ourselves when we were looking at, should this be included? It was included in the past MOU, but the question is there a situation which would be a benefit to the city by having any of the non-sworn employees be able to fill in dispatch? And so we did think there was a benefit. We have our police chief couldn't be here. He's out for family illness reasons, but we have Lieutenant Eberhard here. But I think, you know, our position and our reasons for wanting to leave this in there as is because there is a benefit that could be achieved by having that certificate incentive for any of the non-sworn employees in the department.
So if you did leave that in there, would it be, I mean, it should be, for one, I don't really think it should be, but if it is, it should be earned. It shouldn't be just given to somebody who maybe says they can dispatch, or I don't see how that would encourage somebody to dispatch if they had a certificate.
The intention is that if somebody has a dispatch certificate, that they are able and willing to use that, and that there's a legitimate need of the city from time to time, but not as part of their regular duties for them to use that. So, you know, in talking to the lieutenant and the chief, we do think there's a need for that, and there are times when non-sworn positions could fill in dispatch, and so we've left it there. And that we need to look at it administratively. If there's somebody who isn't willing or able, the intention is that you're paying somebody additional compensation so they have that skill with the expectation that it will be useful to them and used. So that's.
I'm also looking at it towards like a budget thing. I just don't think it's necessary to pay somebody $900 a year to dispatch, once in a while. If they're going to dispatch on a regular basis, I could see it, but not. And that's why I think it should go to the dispatchers, because I think, in our budget, we're trying to make cuts, we're trying to find money, and I just think it's an incentive for a particular job and not for somebody that might do it once or twice a year. I think that's an extreme amount of money for somebody that just might do it once or twice.
So
that much.
That's up to the decision of the council. If the council feels like they want to remove that incentive from the MOU, they can do this. There's no real bargaining that has to happen. It's really just administrative, and basically the increases in this mirror what the FEA got, which is $1 an hour raise the first year, 50 cents an hour the next year, and 25 cents the last year. So it's a flat rate. It's different than the police, and it also includes the same split for health insurance costs. And then we're in one of the smaller kind of incentive areas right now, where this is one of the incentives that is, formalized by this agreement of who gets what for an incentive. So this, if the council wanted to, you could remove this incentive and say, no, we don't want to see non-sworn employees have the potential for a dispatcher certificate. So that's up to the council if you feel that way, and then staff would be happy to take direction.
How do you get a dispatcher certificate?
I might have to ask Lieutenant Everhart to answer that one.
Good evening. First of all, extend the chief's apologies for not making it. Dispatch certificate, there's different levels. There's basic, intermediate, and advanced, and a supervisory. The post certificate is acquired with time on service, completing the basic dispatcher course, and having certain training and education points to obtain that certificate. The benefit with this is taking personnel out of it, just positional. We have a small agency. Being cross-trained and having people with cross qualifications is ideal. Right now we have a sergeant who is a dispatch supervisor. That wasn't always the case. As you saw earlier, we don't know what's going to happen to our staffing levels. So having that option and having that incentive, and if we have to fly that position in the future, having the opportunity to say, we'd like to attract somebody with some prior dispatch experience for the amount of money we're talking about here, $900 a year, I think is worth the benefit.
Any questions for Matt?
So if you did did give somebody that incentive, would you have them work dispatch, make sure that they could do it, and so they would cover shifts before you gave them an incentive? Anybody can say I have training, but they need to know our system. They need to be able to work, take a shift to be able to do that, I would think.
To answer your question, that would be up to the chief's direction, and if there is a concern of how the position is being managed, that would be something that I imagine the council could pick up with the city manager, and it can be dealt with through management.
And I may be able to address that. I think the intention is they get the certificate with the idea that they're willing to use it. There's a number of incentives across the city that, other employees have, for example, in the FEA, say, for example, traffic signal technician. They may not be using it every day. We have our engineering tech who has that, but they may use it once or twice a year, or they may have to go out and help troubleshoot something. But I don't think there's an expectation that it's used on a regular basis, but I think it's an expectation that that expertise will come in useful to the department, whether it's, streets department and traffic signal technician, whether it's the police and dispatch. The understanding and the willingness to participate and use those skills, I think, is understood. So it may not happen on a regular basis, but if there's an employee that gets an incentive and they say, I want nothing to do with it, I just want the money, I'm not going to work on it, that's something we're going to look at very closely, because I don't think that's consistent with the intention in the MOU. So we would handle that on an administrative basis, but staff still feels that having those incentives in the MOU and that base knowledge to those employees so that they can help fill in and contribute when there's an issue or staffing shortage is important.
So then our officers that learn dispatch, if they get their certificate, would they get this also?
That's certainly something the council can include if they want to put more incentives. There's a number of incentives that officers and sergeants get, but again, it comes down to a cost issue. how do you incentivize those employees? There was a lot of incentives that were requested by the police, and I'm sure they would like to see more of them. So again, that's something that the council would have to weigh versus the budget. But they receive other incentives and other compensation.
To speak on that, yeah, it's two different groups. The unrepresented is, accepting basically what the council gives, which is what the FEA is getting with a few incentives, whereas the police department, it looks like it's the rest of the employees are on a different page.
I still think that trying to cut back in this I don't think is an incentive that we should be paying. It doesn't fall into the job description. It doesn't.
It does. It's in the job description.
To take dispatch shifts?
To lend help to dispatch.
Lend help is different than taking a dispatch shift.
If you'd like to see the
And again,
job description, I
the
imagine.
intention is it's not a full-time or even a regular thing. It's the ability to fill in and understand the position. And so again, we'd be happy to take, if the council feels that way and they feel like this is an unnecessary incentive, we could take it out. But staff's recommendation is what's supposed to put forward in the resolution.
Does anyone else have questions?
The way I'm reading it is that the incentive and the certificate and the job description it was written for was to incentivize somebody to have the ability and the skills to step into dispatch if they're needed, but it's not a regular part of their job. But it could be a fallback position, like when we were short-staffed, you had to have people help cover. I mean, I know, so.
Well, and to be frank, I mean, I know right now currently it's in the MOU with the Fpga regarding dispatch supervisory and stuff like that, but things can change in the future. It wasn't that way a while back. It was the office supervisor position that did manage dispatch. Things have changed. I've spoken with the chief, spoken with the city manager. The department will feel it's a value to have that benefit. It is at the council's discretion if that's something they want to do or not.
So if we approve this, it'll only be given, the dispatch incentive will only be given if the person can jump in and take a shift if needed.
It'll be approved if the person has the qualified certificate.
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
If they have issued the certificate, then they would get the incentive, just like any.
So just to be clear, if they have the certificate, they'll get the incentive. The intention of having the certificate is that they're willing to use it. So if there's a situation that came up and there was an employee who had a certificate but was unwilling to use it or exercise those skills, we would require one of two things. One, that they, change their get enough training so that they can do it if for some reason they can't, or, they don't get it if they're unwilling or unable to. So
I think they need to be trained before they get incentive for it.
And I can't speak to a specific employee. Right now, we're just looking
I'm
at
not talking about any specific employee, but just because you've got a certificate and if we hired somebody who has the certificate but they haven't dispatched for 20 years, they need to learn our system, I think, before they get the incentive.
The intention
they
is
could
that
actually
they
work.
can and will use that skill if necessary. And, and if for some reason somebody's getting an incentive and they can't or won't, then that's something we need to deal with from a management level, but it's not something that needs to be addressed at the MOU level.
Well, and I would tend to agree with with Matt's thought process of if you flew the position to anybody else, it's an added incentive to try and find the best recruit possible, regardless of whatever's going on inside the department now. If there is an issue, it's a management issue. It's not an MOU issue. That's how I feel.
Any other comments or questions for Matt? We'll just leave you standing up there for a while. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the resolution?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-18 and read it by title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Sienna?
Resolution 2019-18, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fortuna establishing and authorizing supplemental compensation and benefits for management and confidential unrepresented employees.
Is it roll call or voice?
It's a roll call.
Councilmember Glosser.
Yes.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Stanfields.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent.
And I'm going to vote no just because of that one position.
Mayor Long.
Yes. All right, moving on to city manager report.
Thank you. So just to review the upcoming council meetings dates, the next regular meeting is on August 19th. That'll be the third Monday of August, and the following meeting will be on September 3rd. The next planning commission meeting is on Tuesday, August 13th. The next Measure E committee, as stated by our Measure E chair, is on September 17th, and then that'll be here at City Hall at 5:30. And then the upcoming Rohner Community Recreation and Park District meeting is this Wednesday, August 7th at 2:30. And one of the interesting items they'll be discussing that meeting is just looking at how revenue can be generated for special districts and considering, and also an update on their feasibility study. I just have a couple items for my verbal report. We're really looking forward to concluding the negotiations, and we are excited that we have a tentative agreement with the Fpga. And then on another note, we brought on two new hirees. I'll be introducing them at the next meeting, but we hired a new chief plant operator. His name is Chris Christensen. He comes to us as a supervising operator from the city of Eureka. And then we also hired a deputy city engineer. His name's Brendan Bird. He comes to us from one of our local consulting firm, has also worked on city projects recently and done an exceptional job. So both of those are going to be very good employees. I look forward to introducing them. And they're both, one lives in the Fortuna area and one lives just outside the Fortuna area and grew up here and went to high school here. So it's nice to get some, local folks on board and people who'd like to come and work for the city. So I'm excited about that, especially because it'll reduce some of the workload that I have in both engineering and public works. So that's all I have for my report.
All right, any future agenda items?
One of the members of the public mentioned an updated report on the needle exchange. Is there any information there?
Yeah, I did meet with the county. It was probably about 3.5 weeks ago, and following the passage of the city's syringe exchange ordinance, the county stopped operating within the city limits, and my understanding is that they're operating from an area outside of the city limits. So they stopped for a while and recently started distributing new syringes somewhere outside of the city. We did try to find some type of area in accordance with the ordinance that might be acceptable, but we really weren't able to come up with any good solutions. So my understanding is that they plan to continue operating from outside the city, unless we can find somewhere that seems like it might be a suitable site. But right now, I didn't really have any good suggestions for them on that. But we did talk about if they came in, they are still considering maybe putting in some kiosks and other things to help reduce needle litter. But right now, they don't have plans to operate within city limits, but they are operating outside of city limits.
And is there any information or any data gathering going on right now?
Only
locally?
anecdotal, nothing that I can really report. I mean, I did hear from our crews that they felt like they were finding fewer for a while, but again, it's not enough, not really sound data to make any determinations. I also heard maybe they were finding some that were different than the ones that the county was handing out, but again, it's really hard to say. We don't have any good information on that.
The reason for the question is to see if we still need to pursue some locations for kiosks within our city limits.
I'll check back with our general services and our police, and I think they're the ones who probably encounter them most often. So I can bring that information back at a future meeting and try to get a sense of what we're seeing.
I just don't want to say, okay, that they're not operating within our city, so we don't have a problem anymore. But I just feel like that needle litter still exists, and maybe not as Facebook prevalent as it was, but still a reality. So just don't want to ignore it.
Yeah, and maybe one of the things we can explore, I mean, there's a legitimate need for syringe exchange boxes, in our parks and other places where we can make it convenient, even for diabetics and other than just, drug users. There's legitimate needs too, and a lot of communities do have those in places like bathrooms and at public spaces at parks, so that might be something that we pursue, and I'll be working with Cameron on that as we move forward. We've discussed it at staff level, and I think we'll continue to do that. So I will bring back more information.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to council reports. Dean?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Red Coast Energy Authority meetings, I've missed the last 3 due to other issues going on that took more priority. This month, on the 22nd, there'll be a meeting, and as far as I know, I will be attending that. As for information, I have 3 projects that are going on, Merritt, that if you could have some input. The fish passage for Rohner Creek on 12th Street, what the status is on that.
Yeah, so the 12th Street Fish Passage project, that's a 100% grant funded project from the Fisheries Restoration Grant Program. That's about an $800,000 project. It's midway through construction. Essentially what that project included was we had a culvert, a concrete culvert that the state put in a long time ago. We paid in the county, and it's got a very shallow depth of less than an inch water would trickle over. Fish and game came in later and put some fishways in there to wrap debris and clog it. The intention was good and it helped fish passage some field, but it was maintenance nightmare. So they've made some changes to the inside of the culvert. They finished the completion of inlet apron and outlet apron. They're doing grade control weirs downstream that will ultimately backwater that culvert, so there'll be enough depth in there for fish to swim through at all life stages during fish passage flows in the future. That is going ahead on schedule, and we expect them to be out of the channel within their a lot of construction here. But I did have the opportunity to take Councilmember Stanfield on a tour of those projects, and if any other council members would like to see it, it's quite impressive. That's a big project at 12th Street, and you get down there and look at it, even some bigger. Hillside Creek project is also going well. You may have noticed that it did take us about a week longer to get off the private property that we were working on, so we'll have a few additional costs. But when you look at that project, it's an enormous culvert, it's about 14 feet in depth of rock as a constructed multi-plate culvert. Very difficult, but they are working under one lane Fortuna Boulevard. I'm sure you've seen the traffic control. Our hope is to get across Fortuna Boulevard and we'll open up traffic to the other side. So they are moving along on schedule, and both contractors are doing a great job so far.
Is there any kind, I stopped about a week ago, took an eyeball of the drainage culvert, the concrete drainage culvert that was suspended and supported. With the closure of water on today, was that based on having to remove that line completely out of the way so they could move the barriers and the structures?
There's existing utilities that ran through it's about a 20-foot wide hole that they're digging for the Hillside Creek culvert. And so what you probably saw is there's I think it's an 8-inch water line that's suspended in there. There's also a number of utility conduits that are one trench, and then there's also a gas line. So they had to put essentially a pipe that acted as a beam to suspend all those existing utilities. And our crews went out today and they fixed the water line. The one that was in there needed to be changed how it was configured. And so that is being done, and we'll also have PG&E coming out to relocate one of the gas lines so it has more clearance above our culvert. But it's a huge job, and it's really tricky to get that work done in a small space. So again, it's going very well, and we're really pleased with the work thus far.
To reiterate on that just a little bit, is there the potential that the entire boulevard will be closed off at some point in time for a week's period of time?
No.
So they'll extend to the east and then actually have the Cal Fire side?
Yes.
Backfilled? Wow, okay.
So they're going to have to get halfway across, put the road back, and then start digging across the other half. So right now, all the traffic, we have 2-lane traffic on one side, and then once they get across the median, they'll flip it over and put on the other side. So, and it's gone pretty well. I mean, those kind of changes are hard for the public, but again, I think it's working okay.
So you mentioned it is on time, so that's great.
The whole project's on schedule. It took us a little longer to get off one private property, about a week and a couple of days, so we'll incur some expenses there, but generally it's going pretty well.
That's great. I did want to make a comment about 12th Street, which is the underground utilities. I ended up talking to a property owner on the street that had their crew come and actually dig the trench from the street through the yard and actually do a wonderful hookup to their meter. And the crew that was working was professional, concerned, showed the manner that if you were having your property destroyed for a day or two, that the people that were doing it were concerned about how much of a negative effect it would have. And so the experience for this person was very positive, and I hope that all the people that are going to be impacted with underground lines going to their meters are treated the same positive way.
Well, you can see if you drive down 12th Street, they've already got connected underground to a number of those residences. And usually when people have something they don't like, they call me, and nobody's calling me. So I'm going to assume that that silence means that nobody's that upset, or at least it hasn't gotten to you or I. So I've also received some positive feedback on that contractor, and they're working directly for PG&E on a project that's funded with PG&E Rule 20A funds that are allocated to the city. So again, that's not a project that is costing the city a lot of money. But it's PG&E and their contractor, and I appreciate that they've been conscientious on that project.
Great. Well, you could consider this a positive comment back. God bless America. God bless our troops. May you be safe. For our country that is going through so many shootings and strife, there are 330 million people as Americans. We can all stand together and unite. It's a small core of people that are doing this. And the negative effect that it does have on the people that have lost lives or been impacted, we should still have a lot of compassion for those people, considering that it could have happened to us. So may God be in your favor, and like I said, unite together. Do not be parted and fight each other. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome, Mike.
Well, there was no HCOG meeting last month. It was canceled. But I can say that after attending both the rodeo and the auto expo and being involved in putting those events on, that I think they went real well. They were well attended. I got to tell you, the city parks and general services crew did an excellent job in taking care of things, whether it was street closures or seeing to the needs of the facilities in the parks department. They went above and beyond that was a short period of time with all hands on deck, and they just did a great job. Auto Expo was well attended. I can't even hazard a guess as to the value of the autos on Main Street, but I think every make, model was represented there. And I was surprised the police chief's trophy was not a GTO this year, so I don't know what happened. I also attended the Chamber of Commerce meeting today, although somebody in this room was notable in their absence. So, but I saw that presentation. It was actually a different presentation here than the one earlier, and I am really intrigued by the trails that they're putting in there. I mean, I'm tempted to sneak out there this week and take a hike on them. It looks like they'd be really, really good. So,
if I could just respond to Councilmember Johnson's comment, one thing I neglected to report was that we did submit a Prop 68 grant for the Newburgh Park expansion, and we've asked for 100% funding for the purchase of the adjacent site on the Mcclain property. This approximately 7 acres, and for all the improvements to the ball fields and soccer fields, and adding basketball courts and tennis ball courts and pickleball courts and creating trails and everything else. It's about a $7 million project, maybe a little more, and so we're going to keep our fingers crossed until about December or January to when we hear back. But, you know, if nothing else, we've come back with a full master plan with 7 public comment meetings of what the public wants to see out there. So we get a good product even if we don't get it funded, but we're still hopeful we'll get it funded. One of the keys to that was that we have a community partner in the Mcclain Foundation. One of the ways that they would partner with the city is to, you know, have a trail network that is co-managed and is open to the public. So we are looking at that, and that would be one of the things that would come as a requirement of the grant, that we work with them and manage those trails and have more public access trails over there. So thank you for recognizing that.
one of the other things I was thinking of while I was there was how you can darn near see from the open door clinic to the Gene Lucas Community Center. And those are 2 high-profile projects that they were keenly involved in that probably would not have happened without their participation, that meet needs in the community, whether medical or social, with the Gene Lucas Center. And I thought I'd mention to the people there that this really did fulfill a need, and that I think the Mel and Grace Mcclain Foundation, if they could comment on it, they'd be pleased with what's happened, with the gift that they've given the community. So,
Thank you, Mike. Jeremy?
All right. The week of rodeo, I have my FBID meeting, and they were basically just busy recapping the things that they were going to be involved with throughout that week. Also, out of some of the workshops that they had, they came up with a plan and a calendar for board members to get involved and tag team with the director to go out amongst city businesses and give some FaceTime with them and see what their needs are, see what the bid can do for them, see what their impression of the bid is and how they can enhance what they do. So I thought that was all very positive. They got a dynamic group of volunteers in that Improvement District Committee, and I am the liaison to the committee, but I am not a voting member, and they reminded me that we still need to select a voting member from this body appointed by the mayor. So
To do what?
to be a committee member on FBID. Nico Kilmer was our former appointee.
Oh, I see. It doesn't have to be a council member. We need to appoint somebody.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So they're shy one position, and it's our job to fill it.
So we need to find somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can advertise and fill that position just like we would other volunteer positions. I think I see our city clerk writing that down as an action item right now.
Yeah. Sorry, I probably should have said this sooner, but. And then I'd like to tag team with Cameron and talk about the Parks and Rec Commission. This Friday is going to be our first Movies in the Park on August 9th at 9 p.m. And I'll let him give some of the highlights of what got us here.
Sure, thanks, Jeremy. So I applied for a Hops and Humboldt grant last year over the winter and was successful, $6,000 to purchase Movies in the Park equipment. So I'm happy to say this Friday will be our first feature, and it will be at 9 p.m. in Rohner Park on the pavilion or meadow field. The movie is going to be Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is an excellent movie. It's rated PG, and we'll also have your usual theater concessions on site as well, so people can purchase popcorn, nachos, candy, and grab a blanket, grab a chair, come on out to the park, and we'll all watch a movie together. There is no charge. It is free to the public.
So it's free to the public, and just like at a baseball game where you get a free bobblehead, the first 100 families are eligible for a free throw blanket to sit out on the lawn and enjoy your movie. So, the other thing I just want to bring up to the public in general is that maybe less than once a year, the California Coastal Commission has one of their annual meetings held in Eureka, and that chance to speak to the Coastal Commission about anything related to coastal issues is this 7th, 8th, and 9th this week. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the Coastal Commission will be at the Wharfinger Building to speak regarding the local coastal plan guiding document. That's a mouthful. But it really impacts people that are within the Coastal Commission's influence regarding maintenance of their homes or different projects that they want to try and launch or different industry that they want to implement within the coastal zone. So if you are affected by that or have any intentions to acquire property or do a business that would be impacted by or negative or positively impacted by the Coastal Commission, it's worth your time to attend. They don't always come up to our end of the state, so take advantage, please. And then lastly, I got an email that talks about the housing element update that's coming up on August the 13th. It's a public hearing for Fortuna's housing element. And so I'm curious real quick to know if that's generated from one of our priority lists or if that's a first step of many to lead up to council's conversation?
And so what that is the state, it's their circulation. So we submitted the draft housing element to them for review, and so they're, and that they're the approval agency, and so they will be soliciting public comments on that prior to their acceptance of the housing element. And so that is one of the things that we worked on. There was some consultant paid work that we did to update that. We used the last consultant, but really it was just to update it from last year to this year. And so we will be undertaking some of the elements and programs and submitting an SB2 grant to go for money to implement some more of the programs that are within that housing element.
Okay. And is this where the conversation about ADUs comes in? It was higher on our priority list after our last.
Yeah, so what we're hoping is.
Workshop.
Yeah, it's kind of a spin-off. It doesn't have to, those are programs within the housing element that we're seeking approval from the state for, but the programs within that, we're hoping to go after every single one of those and use consultants to do that and finish each one of those programs with SB2 funds. But we're working on the application now, and I think they're kind of an over-the-counter. If you get it in, then you're eligible for a certain amount of funding. So we have a pretty good chance of success, and we're working on finalizing our grant scope, which includes most of the programs in there, including the ADU.
So this is meeting a state deadline, but this is not ending the conversation about our housing element.
It is meeting the state deadline, and it is our actual housing element, but it's not, the details of the program aren't finished. Those will come later.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Anybody involved in the housing element, show up here on August 13th. That concludes my report.
All right, thanks. Tammy?
Lost where I was going there. The movies in the parks, that's just an example of some of the money that HOPS grants out. HOPS is coming up the 24th of this month. Anybody who hasn't got tickets yet, get your tickets for it. All the profits go back to the community in grants or scholarships. So it's a good cause. So come out and enjoy HOPS. And I don't drink, but I work it. So that's a good one of our good functions. I also want to thank all of the city staff for July. July's a hard month on our city, our parks, our roads, our police department, and I'd also like to thank all of the supporting police departments for the other agencies from other cities that come down and help us with that event. Everybody did a great job, and everything turned out really well. So that's all I have to report.
So during rodeo, I got the opportunity to host our League of California Cities rep, Sarah Sanderson, and her husband, Brian, from Sacramento. So that was really cool that they got to spend some time in Fortuna during a fun show off our city time. They had a blast, and because of the Rodeos Association and Mike Johnson's hard work, they got tickets to every event, and they just really enjoyed it. If any of you know Sarah, you know that she's just fun to be around, and they went on the rides. They said, of course we want to go on the rides, and so they went on all the carnival rides. They did everything. You couldn't slow them down or stop them, so that was really fun. Thank you, Mike, for all your hard work getting all the tickets lined up. I had a REDEC meeting on the 22nd. They did a presentation from the Nordic Aqua Farms for a fish farm. I don't know how many people have seen that presentation. It's pretty interesting. They're on about a 2.5-year schedule if it all goes well, and it'll provide about 80 jobs. So we'll see if that moves forward or not. We renewed the contract for our executive director for another 2 years, and I will be attending the League of California Cities meeting in Point Arena on Friday, so I'm going to miss the first movie. I know, not happy, but okay. HOPS board was really, really excited when they saw that grant. And so that was one of the things that, without a doubt, was just like put right on we're approving that list, we'll cut something else. So, fun thing. Is anyone else going to Point Arena this week? Is anybody? I am. So it's Tammy and I, okay. There's a couple legislative items on there, but I think they're pretty much no-brainers as far as going with what the league is suggesting as far as opposing or passing. So I'll be voting on that, which means I have to leave like at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's not very happy about that. Other than that, I think that's it. We do have closed session.
Can I make a comment?
Regarding
the fish farm, I missed a presentation that was held, I think last Thursday. I really wanted to attend to kind of understand what that was all about. And I just text messaged Supervisor Bone and said, I really want to be there, but I've got another commitment at work. And he said that he's happy to set up a presentation for this group if we're interested.
Anybody interested? I've seen it like twice. Anybody?
Is
But
that the one in Samoa?
Yes.
on the harbor.
But if it's
Old
80
Harbor?
jobs, chances are that some of those will be our citizens. I'd just be interested in economic development. Are you interested? Yeah?
Okay. You make a note of that and contact the appropriate people. All right, thanks.
I missed something.
Yes.
Microphone.
Keeping with the rodeo and auto expo events.
Need your microphone.
In keeping with the rodeo and auto expo events, I omitted one of our divisions, the police department. They were there 2 nights in a row at the rodeo until what, midnight, thereabouts. And then on Friday night,
Oh
the
my
auto
gosh.
expo cruise, that is always a hard thing to do. And they were there for about half of your people were out there working that night. And when you've just disrupted the traffic through town, not counting the construction, sometimes people's tempers get short, so they end up having to deal with that. But that's another set of events that couldn't be done without their participation also. So thank you for that too.
Hopefully it was easier to deal with the traffic than the quadiators.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have 2 items on closed session. We have conference with real property negotiator in accordance with section 54956.8 of the government code for property at 2600 Newburgh Road. Negotiating parties, the city manager Merritt Perry for the city price and terms. And our second item is a conference with labor negotiators, the city negotiators, city manager Merritt Perry, employee organization, the Fortuna Police Employees Association, in accordance with section 54957.6 of the government code. Does anyone have any comments before we adjourn to closed session regarding these 2 items? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. We need a motion.
That's my job.
No, it's her job, her job.
Oh, I didn't know.
Don't trump.
Motion to adjourn to closed session?
Now I know never to tread on that.
Y'all just don't agree.
Should I second or not?
No,
Whose job is to second?
don't agree. Let her suffer.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn to closed session. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.